What's up, everybody? My name is Sam Dando with MinMax Games, and I wanted to bring you a deck tech today of if I was going to Worlds, what deck I would play. Now, some of you may know me. You may have seen me behind the booth. You may have played against me in the tournament. If you don't know who I am, I've been playing this game for about 3 years now. I started during the Monarch era, and I have been playing Assassin since Uzuri was revealed. So I am very familiar with the Assassin class, and Nu has been quite an interesting hero since Mistveil's development and now coming into Rosetta. And the place that she fills even now is more interesting with a meta presuming that Dash.io is one of the best decks. So in a world full of Runeblades and Dash.io and the Enigma, of course, around the corner, how can we build the deck to target this perceived world's meta? So the deck that I've constructed today was a deck that I built for my ProQuest specifically with Dash.io in mind and Runeblades. So I wanted to show it to you today. There are some new ideas, some new things that maybe you haven't considered, and I wanted these ideas to just be able to have as an option in case it might be something different or you are struggling to beat these particular matchups. So let's go ahead and get started. Just for the generic cards right here at the top, we have Enlightened Strike, of course. This is just a standard extender, mid-range tool. It's just one of the best cards in the deck. I feel like you always have to play it. Along with Triple Command and Conquer. Again, this is just one of the best cards in the deck, especially being able to be abused with Codex of Frailty and to just constantly kind of beat through your opponents with a lot of value and them not allowing to be able to play D-reacts to it as well. And then in a similar vein, we have Leave No Witnesses. Again, more disruption to target the arsenal and to be able to be played with all of your assassin reaction cards as well. And then I have one of Death Touch. This card I was very apprehensive about when it was first proposed to me to be able to be played in the deck. Again, coming from Uzuri, I love this card. It's one of my favorite cards in the game, but I didn't think it was as abusable as it is in Uzuri. But I was very surprised to find how well it works in the deck with Codex, and there are a lot of turns where you can just arsenal it and play it off of Tunic, and then it also plays with your reaction cards as well. I just find that this card raises your ceiling, so you can have way more powerful plays throughout the course of the game, and it just is an additional threat, along with being able to be a frailty creator against decks like Dash.io and Azalea and things like that. So moving into the reactions, we have Triple Just Nick. Again, one of the most powerful cards in the deck, works alongside of all of your one attack cards, and is just a constant threat that your opponent always has to be aware of. And then along with those reactions, I have 2 Venomous Bite and then 2 Hiss. Again, pretty standard. Some of you might be playing 3 of each. I'll show a little bit later on why I'm only playing 2. But as a rule of thumb for me as a deck builder, if you ever see me playing 2 of a card, it's usually because it's a card that I do not want to draw 2 of in the same hand. So in Flesh and Blood, you're always drawing 4 new cards at the end of your turn. And a lot of times, if you're playing 3 copies of a card, basic probability, the odds of drawing 2 in your hand are much higher than if you're only playing 2 copies. So although these cards are powerful, they also do create a lot of situations where your deck can brick, which means you draw a hand that functionally doesn't do anything because you're playing defense reactions, you're also playing attack reactions, and they're reds. So all of those things can, in the wrong hand, equal to being a disaster. So I try to minimize that by reducing these each to 2. So I still have access to these as powerful cards, but I'm not reliant on having so many of them that it's going to brick my hands. So it's going to create more consistency, which is why I only have them at 2. Something to note too, I played this deck in my ProQuest last week. I ended up going undefeated. I did lose in finals. I split with an Enigma player, but that matchup is very difficult, as we'll get into later. But the deck performs very well under this particular meta. And again, moving into Codex of Frailty is our only yellow. This card, it's one of the best cards in Flesh and Blood at this point. Ever since it was printed, it's just been a menace in the game, and it's no different with Nu. This card interacts with all of your power cards over here, as you see with Disruption between Command and Conquer, Leave No Witness, Death Touch. There's just no way you wouldn't play 3 of them. And Frailty is so powerful right now in the meta, again, as we'll get to. Now moving to the blues, I play 2 Intimate Inducement. Now, some of you may look at this card and go, this is bad, this is a trash card, why would you play this? But if you look at my ratios here against my other reactions, I am still playing 9 in the main deck. It's just that 2 of them are now blues, which drastically lowers the probability of you bricking in a hand, because just having a blue in your hand could fix so many of your problems. Along with that, this card is very good in this current meta, especially against Dash.io. So if you don't know what it does, it's a 0 cost. It gives +1 to an assassin or mystic attack, much like Venomous Bite and Hiss. But instead of causing disruption to the hand, it causes disruption to the top of the deck. So you get to look at 2 of the cards on top of their deck and then force one of them to be put into the chain to block your attack. If it's a blue, it's a 0 block, so it's a non-block. But what this card allows you to do is you can pull High Octane, Spark of Genius, Teklo Core, Cerebellum Processor, and for Dash.io, the top of their deck is an extension of their hand. It is the 5th card in their hand. So you are targeting hand disruption with this card. It does allow for you to really mess up their next turn that they have set up, and it allows you to pull a power card out of their deck, which is very good in a game state where in the win condition is fatigue. If you just pull 1 High Octane, 1 Spark, 1 Cerebellum, that's a ton of value throughout the course of the game. So although at face value this card may look ambiguous in terms of how much value it provides to you, the value is more ethereal. It is more along the lines of future disruption, investing into the future of the game state, and attacking your opponent on an axis that they don't have as much control over, such as playing cards out from their hand at instant speed or protecting them, because again, if the game state is fatigue, just pulling another card out of deck, that is just one more card that they no longer have in their deck. So it does advance a lot of things into your advantage, and it also interacts with all your stealth cards, which is what we'll get into now. So we have to begin 3 Bonds of Agony. Again, one of the more powerful cards in the deck that interacts with Just a Nick, all of your reactions, and the equipment that we'll get to as well. No reason not to play 3 of. And then we also have Persuasive Prognosis. Again, alongside of Just a Nick, or I'm sorry, Bonds of Agony. It is very powerful. Again, this also interacts very well with Intimate Inducement, because if you're pulling an action card out of their deck and they've already blocked with it, this is going to banish it at the end of the chain, which means you're going to gain another life. So again, in combination with these cards and also the Art of Desire Mind, which also similarly will banish blues to draw additional cards and gain life, the synergy between these cards is very good. Also, so far, this is all very standard, nothing super new for the deck. Triple Bonds of Attraction. This, alongside of Bonds of Memory, plays very well into this current meta if you're playing against CYB decks, which is Count Your Blessings, which has become a pretty popular archetype, I would say, particularly with decks like Florian. You do see it mixed in with a lot of other rogue things like Teklevossen and even Enigma sometimes. But this allows you to just have more control over the graveyard, attacking that additional axis of your opponent to remove their Count Your Blessings, which in turn will save you a ton of value throughout the long term of the game. In addition to other matchups, targeting graveyard allows you to fuel your options as new to target their banished zone to play their cards. So it just allows you more options to access in your toolbox, and it does counter the meta pretty well right now if you're expecting to see any CYB decks, which at Worlds, I would definitely expect there to be those kinds of decks. Now for just more kind of like generic stealth cards, we have Triple Infect, which is very good against Enigma and just a lot of other decks to be a potential threatening blue with an on-hit, which gives the Blood Rot on-hit. And then additionally, Wither, which is not very common in a lot of the new decks up until this point. But I think right now in this meta, this card is very important to be able to shut off the pistol of Dash.io. So as you're kind of seeing between the Death Touch, the Codex of Frailty, and now also the additional Wither, I always want to make sure that the Dash.io has a Frailty token, because that will significantly hinder their ability to play a high octane turn and attack you with the pistol 5-6 times to get max value. It's really important to win that matchup to make sure that they have a Frailty on the turn that they want to pop off. So Wither is just another additional power card for that, but it also interacts really well in this meta, particularly in the mirror. So in my Pro Quest, I played against 2 mirrors and I beat both of them. And having additional Frailty is super powerful. To shut off daggers, a lot of New's hands have to be converted into dagger attacks. Having the Frailty denies that, and it also helps to lower the ceiling of the potential damage that they can do to you. So there are a lot of implications. Frailty is a very powerful token. I think it's underlooked a lot of times, but as you play more games, the Frailty token just adds up so much additional value and really enhances your minor trading and your minor value that you get out of it in the long term of the game. And then for just more standard blues, we have triple levels of Enlightenment, which is great, and then triple Surgical Extraction. Again, nothing too groundbreaking here. These cards are always seen in all the new decks. They're very powerful, and they're two of your big power cards in the deck in general. Now, moving to the sideboard. So as you could tell, obviously this is not 60 cards. I do not play in my main deck 60 cards. Especially as Assassin, you have a toolkit, you have a toolbox that allows you to attack different matchups in different ways. So I think my core here is probably like 48 cards if I remember, and then I'm sideboarding in cards to transform the deck to have gain advantages into certain matchups. So to start, I have my 2-for-6 on-hit disruption cards. So I'm playing 2 Erase Face and 1 Weakest Link. Now you might be like, Sam, why would you do this? Why wouldn't you play 2 of each or just 3 copies of Erase Face, for example? Why would you have this weird split? Well, to put it, I guess, just like in a simpler context that I can kind of try to explain, Erase Face is very powerful right now because of Dash.io and Runeblades and even Earth Heroes and Lightning Heroes. This allows you to shut off their ability to kind of extend their turns or be able to play the game the way that they want to play the game. So it is very powerful. It is what I call non-conditional disruption, which means if it hits, it's going to disrupt. As opposed to something like this, which is conditional disruption, which means the Weakest Link, when you hit, they have to have a non-block in hand for it to be impactful. It's kind of like CNC, where if it hits and they don't have an arsenal, it's not getting full value. But the Weakest Link, undeniably, is a very powerful card, hence the $50 price tag that it has on TCG Player, or whatever it's at now, 60 bucks. But I do think this card has lost a little bit of its pizzazz in this current meta. Last meta, no doubt, it was incredibly powerful against Zen, Enigma, and you may say, well, now there's so many more decks with non-blocks. There's Aurora, there's still Enigma, there's still Zen, but a lot of those, and Dash.io, of course, as well with the items. But a lot of those decks can now play around this card. So Dash.io, for example, can have an item and you attack, and they pitch that item away to play an item off the top of their deck, and now they've evaded your disruption. Erase Face, they can't really do that as much. Enigma can kind of play out her hand in reaction to this card. Aurora, even though it does disrupt their turn, they can just play out their instance as well so that they're not getting disrupted and then, pitch into their Aurora ability or something. So there's a lot of ways to play around this card. So again, you might be saying, well, why don't I just play triple Erase Face? Well, the problem is that Erase Face is a 2-block, and you definitely don't want to have, back to my other rule before, I don't want to play 3 copies of this card because I don't want to draw 2 of them in the same hand, especially against Dash.io, which I'm not planning to attack a lot. I'm primarily trying to block and find my windows to do disruption. And if I have double Erase Face in my hand, it's a red, it's a 2-block, it's not really going to aid my game plan, and it's not going to really allow me a lot of flexibility, which is what I want as an assassin. I want to be able to play the best thing that my hand can present. If I have double Erase Face, that's not going to really be the most beneficial thing that I can do for that turn. So Weakest Link, it is a 3-block, does offer a lot of great disruption throughout the meta, but it is conditional, and I don't value it as highly as it used to be last meta. So hopefully that tries to explain a little bit. But you can look at these as the 3 2-for-6 disruptions, just adding a little bit more flexibility to your toolkit and aiding your game plan a little bit better, again, into Dash.io, Aurora, these decks that we expect to be at the top tables and we expect to see all throughout Worlds. Now, in addition to that, we have our basic 3 looking for a scrap. Again, very powerful. This allows you to be a little bit more aggressive into the matchups that are being more defensive, such as Enigma or any CYB decks. So very efficient. It curves out really well, which means that if you pitch a blue into this and then you have 2 floating, you can follow that up with an Erase Face, a CNC, a Codex into something. It also can be played off of Tunic, which is just really efficient. So looking for scrap is a very valuable attack in this deck. Moving into reactions, we have Triple Sink Below, Double Fate, and now this card, which I think is absolutely necessary if you're playing new into this field with Dash.io, 2 Frailty Trap. I cannot stress enough how important this card is. It is very difficult to win that matchup without Frailty Trap. Now, as I mentioned before, you want to make sure that your opponent has a frailty when they try to high octane you. Now, all these other cards are face-up frailties, right? You hit them with the Wither, you hit them with a Codex of Frailty. They know going into the start of their turn that they are going to have a frailty, so they might opt to save the high octane. Frailty Trap, that's not the case. they're going to have to already commit their cards. They're already going to have to play the high octane out before they find out that they're getting hit with the frailty trap. So throughout the course of the game, I find this card, I put it in arsenal, and I just wait. I will just wait all game for them to play their high octane, and when they do, I'll hit them with the frailty trap, and at that point, you are going to be so far ahead in value because you're going to deny their pistol, which is super important in a fatigue state game. Along with that, Frailty Trap is quite relevant in this meta, again, into the Mirror, into Azalea, into any kind of rogue warriors. Again, I know that's not like the most reasonable thing to expect at Worlds, but it is still quite viable in general across the board, not just Dash.io. But again, you might ask, so why am I only playing 2? If it's so important, why don't you play 3? Well, the other thing is you don't want to die to boom grenades, which is the way that Dash.io will try to win the fatigue matchup. So still having the 4 block breakpoints between the Sinks and Fates I find to be very important. And although Frailty Trap is very powerful, it is a 3 block. And it can get difficult to block the boom grenades once you've gone through armor and they're just attacking with outpace, especially, which you can't even use armor on, or red 0 to 60, or even red zipper hits and things like that. Having the 4 block on the D-React is very important. So I think it's very valuable to have a mix of more 4 blocks, along with that Aurora, super prevalent, again, as we saw through the PQ season, one of the most winning decks in total alongside of Enigma. 4 blocks are very valuable against her. So it's kind of a hedge between Dash.io and Aurora, but it also allows, again, the importance to be able to block efficiently, outvalue your opponent, and have options. You want to make sure that you're flexible. You can kind of maneuver any kind of attack or game plan that they have, you'll have an answer for, which is the point of Assassin, right? You want to have multiple answers to the questions that they're asking you. And then next I have 2 Siren's Call, as this finishes up my reaction package here. Now, Siren's Call undeniably is a very powerful card in New. It is one of the best cards in New because it is, again, slightly unconditional / conditional disruption, right? If they don't have a blue in hand, it doesn't do a lot. But if they do, there's nothing they can do to interact with it. It is going to force that blue out of their hand, and it's probably going to ruin their turn. And again, you might say, well, Sam, why are you only playing 2? That seems crazy. It's such a good card. Why wouldn't you play 3? Going back to my rule again, this card is very good, but it is a 1-cost red reaction that doesn't really progress your game as much as it does try to hinder your opponent. So it can be quite a bricky card when you have multiple of it in your hand. And I have found it too, it's very, very good. Especially right now, last meta, for sure, Triple Siren's Call was very important because you had Enigma, you had Zen, particularly Zen, right? That you wanted to be able to target. And attacking their hand was one of the most important ways to try to disrupt them. Now we look at the meta, the top decks, again, Aurora, not really playing a lot of blues. Azalea, not playing a lot of blues. You have Dash.io. If she allows you the opening to play a Siren's Call, it can be very good, but you're mostly going to be blocking with it. And again, if they have a blue, they can respond to you and pitch it away to play an item off the top, and then you miss. And missing on Siren's Call is quite bad. I mean, it definitely is a pretty bad investment into your turn and can really hinder your ability to kind of continue to progress the game state. So I have found that in this meta, 2 is perfect. I think it is really good as where it is. And in addition, right, like Guardians aren't as prevalent right now. You might start to see Victors and things at Worlds to try to counter the Dash.ios. But 2 Siren's Call, still an incredible card, still good to have in the arsenal. I just don't think it's as important right now in this meta as it was in the prior one. And then similarly, we have Double Warmongers. This card is one of the best cards in the game. I think right now it is incredibly important to have in your deck if you can play it. You can argue that New doesn't utilize this card as well as some other decks do, which I agree, but I think that this card is very important to kind of help you get to that point of if you are getting steamrolled and you're not able to kind of find your window to get your tempo back, this says, please stop hurting me. You know, you just drop this card and it can kind of help you regain the tempo and reset the current tempo of the game state, particularly against Azalea, Viserai, Dash.io, right? Against Dash.io, it might not do anything if they don't have a board, right? You could just play this, they say war, and then attack you 3 times. But you really want to save it for when they have like double Cerebellum processor on the board and a Tekla core or something. You play this, that's going to take away all their value that turn from being able to utilize those Cerebellum processors, which is huge. It buys you a whole nother turn, and it denies them a ton of extra value that they could have had access to. especially if they had Spark or High Octane or something. But I think that Warmongers is very, very important right now. And especially even into Viserai. You know, I've heard people say, it doesn't even hurt new Viserai, right? Like they're just playing Malefic Incantations. They don't care. I think that that's not true. If you play a Warmongers and they have Revel, Rattlebones, Succumb, Runic Reckoning, you know, there's Become the Arknight. You know, there's so many cards that usually start off big power turns for Viserai, Sonata Arcanix, you know, that this will stop that. Sure, they might still be able to play their turn out, unlike old Viserai, which are just pass, but that is undeniably important in value, where you could be denying them 8, 10 value in a turn by just playing a Warmongers and stopping those power cards from coming out. And it allows you to regain tempo on the next turn. You can then, you know, disrupt them again. So I think this card is very important right now. And again, you may say, Sam, why not play it at 3? You keep saying these cards are so important. Why wouldn't you play it at 3? I think there's like a very strange, I call it the Warmongers paradox, where you play 3 because you want to see it right away. But when you play 3, I have found so many times that I play one Warmongers and on my next hand I draw another one. And it's like kind of a useless card at that point, especially if you've stolen tempo. You can just convert it into a dagger, but why not have it be a better card? And again, New isn't leveraging Warmongers as well as a deck like Zen or Aurora, where you know you're attacking a bunch, then you end your turn with the Warmongers, and then your next turn you attack them a bunch again. New doesn't really have that. Again, this is more of a defensive, please let me reset the game state so I can kind of go back into my game plan or present an opening for me to try to regain tempo again. 2 is the perfect number. I think that this card is very good right now, and I'm very happy with it at 2. Now, if you've noticed, where's my chi? What's going on? I'm playing New. Why are there no chi in this deck so far? Well, that's because the thing that I think is most different about my list than much of the other decks is that I am not playing Mask of Recurring Nightmare. I am on Mono Traverse. Now, this might be very different for some people to see, as opposed to some people who might already be on this kind of list or be playing this kind of deck. I think right now, Mono Traverse New is the best way to play New. I'm only playing 4 chi. Now, where are the differences? You know, why play this over Mask of Recurring Nightmare? Undoubtedly, Mask of Recurring Nightmare is very powerful. It pulls a card out of your opponent's hand. It creates additional disruption. But there are many downsides that come to playing that card. First and foremost, you're going to have to play a lot more chi. Typically, 6 to 8 chi is where you're going to want to be at if you're playing a Mask of Recurring Nightmare list. Now, already to begin with, Assassin has very small amounts of margin for cards. Like you're already trying to maximize your space as much as possible, get as much like maximum value out of every card choice that you have in the deck. Being able to have chi to make Mask work is important, but it significantly hinders your ability to play other options or to build your deck in a way to be flexible into different matchups. When you have 4 chi, you know, you're only relying on New ability, which again, New's hero ability can range from useless to game-winning. And you can leverage that with these kinds of builds. So when you're playing into a matchup where you want New's ability to win, you have that. Now, also, Traverse, you might be saying, well, if I'm playing against a matchup that the New ability doesn't matter anymore, then what's the point? It's still a blue. As we talked earlier, New is susceptible to bricking, right? You have a turn where you've disrupt or you kind of have the tempo. You could draw a hand that just says you don't get to do anything but throw a double dagger. And that is the last thing that we want in this kind of meta, where we need to be continuously disrupting, continuously playing a consistent game plan across the whole match. Traverse can save you on that. It's still just a blue. You know, we played Balance of Justice in the past because it draws you another card. This allows you to search a blue at any point that you want. Not only does it help you with brick hands, it also helps you to create massive turns. Like you can do huge damage turns with the right hand, especially if you have levels of enlightenment or a silver on board in combination with that. You can just really create some huge turns and swing turns with Traverse. So I think this build right now, because against Dio, I'm not playing any non-blocks. Every card in my deck blocks against that deck. If you're playing the Mask of Recurring Nightmare, you're going to have to throw in 6 to 8 chi into your deck against that, and I do not think that is enough to stop that deck. They are just going to run you over, especially if you have a non-block in your hand. And to use the Mask, you still have to threaten them, right? You still have to hold a card like a blue Persuasive and a chi And Dash IO can just say, I don't care, I'll just get rid of this one card and then hit you for 30 with my 4-card hand or whatever. So I think that right now, Traverse is the best build, for me at least, in the way that I like to play the deck. I really, really like this setup and having these options. And Traverse is just such a flexible card. Even though there's minimal Guardian, into like a mid-range Florian, it's super powerful. Into an Enigma, for sure against Enigma, this can help you push through on big turns. I do think that this is the optimal way to play this particular list against Dio and into the field. Now, like I said earlier in the video, this might not appeal to you, this might not be the way that you're used to playing new, but I would like to just propose it as a potential new idea for you to maybe take from or to consider as you go forward into Worlds. Now, another thing that might be a little different from what you're used to is my daggers. As you can see, I'm only playing Scale Peeler and Beckoning Mistblade. Now this again might be kind of weird because you're used to playing Spider's Bite, maybe even Nerve Scalpel, but I find in this meta, people do not want to block with cards from their hand, especially all the Runeblades. And so many decks have fridges now between Brute, Runeblade, even Dio. You know, they all have a large fridge of armor that they want to just throw in front, preserve their whole hand, and just attack you. Scale Peeler will always deny that. As long as you're poking them with Scale Peeler, you are going to disrupt them so much harder because they have to block with cards from hand. And a common thing between Aurora and Dio is their hands kind of suck at blocking. You know, they have a lot of non-blocks. Of course, Dio has 3 blocks, and Aurora can have hands with like electromagnetic somersault and things like that. But taking away their ability to block with armor is so huge. You know, we could see last meta against Zen where people were poking with the Scale Peeler to prevent the big traverse turns from being able to block them. Same kind of thing applies right now. And Spider's Bite just does not get you the same amount of value as Scale Peeler does because they are fine with just throwing their armor in front of your disruption and then killing you within 3 to 4 turns. Scale Peeler is very good. I don't think that Spider's Bite is needed right now. I think that these are the only 2 daggers you need going into this meta. Now, in addition, we have like our just normal baseline equipment between the Tunic, Rousing Wave, Undertow Stiletto. Now, the other headpiece that I do play is Balance of Justice, right? So we have the Traverse if we're going to have games where we want to play the Chi, but then we have Balance of Justice, particularly against Aurora and Dio, and Brutes too, right? Now, those are the decks, maybe not KO. KO, you might want to play Traverse because you can combo them, but Leviah, for sure, you want Balance of Justice. Now, these cards, you know, allow you to be able to block and just have more survivability. They're effectively similar in what they're doing, right? But balance is better for those turns that they're trying to overwhelm you and you can kind of maintain your health and be healthy while they're trying to overwhelm you in a way. And New doesn't do super well with overwhelming turns because you need large hands to disrupt at least 3 cards most of the time. Now, balance can help with that. So I think that balance and traverse are super important right now in the meta, particularly Balance of Justice when you're playing against those hyper aggro decks that want to just have big turns against you. That really helps you survive. It's very critical. And then in addition, I have Vambrace. This is really good into Enigma, obviously. Now that matchup is really tough. You know, I know some people say that they have plans, they have a good idea how to beat that matchup, and I do think it is winnable. But I do think that Enigma is very tough right now, especially because they're hyper-teched for Dio, much like us, and a lot of that tech hurts New in addition to hurting Dio, such like Dense Blue Mist and more defense reactions and things like that all you got. So I think that matchup got a lot tougher. I'm not trying to invest a ton of cards into Enigma. Again, we're an assassin. There's only so much we can do in our ability to target other decks. And I think that right now we're trying to target the Runeblades, we're trying to target the Dios and other cards or other decks in like the Rogue field. Enigma, of course, is a deck that you have to respect. It will be present, but there are only so many things that we can do. And I think that that matchup is already quite tough. And it is very difficult to try to gain additional points based on the amount of cards you'd have to invest into that matchup. And then I just have like my basic Arcane Barrier here. We have the Abdomen, the Veil Respirator, and then the Arcane Lantern. Now, since we are playing Traverse, I find that I'm playing Lantern a lot more typically because I want to have my headpiece open to be able to respond. But there are certain decks like Viserai where I'm playing the Veil Respirator because Double Dagger is just so powerful into Viserai. But into like Aurora, for example, I'm playing these pieces. So having the headpiece open is really important right now in this kind of list. So don't feel bad about leaning into the Lantern and just playing Scale Peeler or Beckoning Mistblade, depending on the matchup. Now, I do still respect Kano. I do think that Kano is very good in this meta potentially, and depending on how he matches into the gem pairings, is still a threat that I want to respect. So that's why I have the Abdomen in there. It's only for Kano. And I find that into Kano, my best equipment loadout is the Abdomen, the head, and then having these two open for Kano, just because the threat of the Arousing Wave is almost impossible for Kano to play around. You know, so if you play a Command and Conquer, they're not really going to be able to block out that Command and Conquer if you have Arousing Wave threatening them. In addition to Bonds of Agony, always having Bonds of Agony as a big threat to them is huge. That really helps deny Kano's ability to combo off on you. And then just having Spell Void 2, in addition to AB3, can help you block out most times of them surging. So if they are attacking with a Wildfire for, like, let's just say 7 or 8, you can still stop that surge because you'll AB3 on the first one, and then let's just say it's 7, then they're going to open the floodgates on you for 4. You'd be able to AB2 and then Spell Void 2, or AB3, Spell Void 1, stop the surge. So it is very important in being able to stop the combo, and I do find that that matchup now is actually quite winnable for new. It is not as bad as it used to be, and you can really play like an honest game of Flesh and Blood with Kano, just given how much disruption you have and how bad it affects him. So that's pretty much the list that I have right now. Again, I'm not saying this is the best list. I'm not saying this is the list you should play, but I'm saying if I was playing at Worlds, this is the new deck that I would play. Currently, how Assassin is, you can't plan for everything. You can't kill every deck, but you can target the best decks, and there's enough tools in the toolbox of Assassin to be able to really hyper-focus on those things. You just have to be considerate of what you're picking, really know your matchups, and really have a solid plan as you're going into these other decks. I think that this is perfect for me. This offers everything that I would want, and I wish you best of luck if you are attending Worlds and playing new. I hope this video taught you some things, gave you some new ideas, or maybe even you'll play this deck, and I hope you do really well at Worlds with it if that's the case. I'll miss you all. I won't be there. I'm going to be back at home, but I do hope that you all have a great time, and this video was also very educational for you. So if you like this kind of stuff, let me know. I'm happy to continue to produce content like this. I also do love deck building and explaining in terms of how I think about things with decks. So please let me know in a comment below, but I hope you have a wonderful day, and I hope you'd enjoy this video. Thank you so much.